The cowboy married the Apache widow until he didn't know she had a son. Wild West story. The wind carried dust across the land, and the distant hills looked like shadows of old secrets waiting to be discovered. Tom Harris, a tall, rugged cowboy with sun-weathered skin and eyes that had seen too many miles of the Wild West, rode slowly into the small town of Red Rock. He had traveled for weeks on horseback, leaving behind the life of the open trail to find something he could not name. He wanted a home, a place where his hands could work the land instead of endless cattle drives, a place where he could finally rest. Red Rock was little more than a cluster of wooden buildings with dirt streets. The saloon's swinging doors creaked in the wind, and a blacksmith hammered rhythmically in the distance. A few children chased a goat along the main street, laughing despite the dry, dusty air. Tom tied his horse to a post near the town's general store. His boots sank slightly into the dirt as he stepped down. He had learned long ago that nothing in the West was permanent. Towns could rise and fall in a season. Fortunes could vanish with a single storm, and people often had to rely on themselves more than anyone else. As Tom walked past the store, he noticed a small cabin on the outskirts of the town, closer to the hills. Smoke rose from its chimney, curling into the sky. The cabin looked simple but cared for, with neat piles of firewood stacked by the door and a small garden of vegetables and herbs. Something about the cabin drew him closer, a quiet hum of life amidst the harsh surroundings. He found Maya outside, kneeling among her garden. She was a young Apache widow with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to notice everything at once. Her long black hair was tied back simply, and her hands were strong yet delicate as they worked the soil. When she saw Tom, she straightened, wiping dirt from her hands, and greeted him with a quiet nod. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a calm acknowledgement of his presence. "Good evening," Tom said, tipping his hat. His voice was deep and steady. "Evening," Maya replied softly. Her voice carried the lilt of her Apache heritage, musical yet firm. "Are you passing through?" "Yes," Tom said, glancing at the hills beyond her cabin. "Looking for a place to rest for a while. Thought I might find some work, maybe help out. I've been riding a long time." Maya studied him, her eyes moving from his worn boots to the dust-streaked brim of his hat. "We don't get many travelers here. Red Rock isn't much, but it's safe enough for a night or two." Tom nodded. "Safe enough is good enough for me." They spoke for a while, Tom learning about the land and the few neighbors scattered across the hills. Maya explained how she managed the small farm on her own, how she grew vegetables and herbs, and how she cared for the cabin after her husband's passing. Tom listened, impressed by her independence and quiet determination. Most men he had met in his travels would have been intimidated by her strength, but he felt drawn to it. It reminded him of the open plains, resilient, stubborn, alive. Days turned into weeks, and Tom continued to visit Maya. At first, it was just small conversations, helping her with chores, fetching water, repairing a broken fence, but slowly they shared more of themselves. Maya told stories of her childhood, of growing up near the hills and learning the ways of her people. She spoke of her late husband, a brave and kind man, lost too soon to the violence that often swept the frontier. Tom shared stories of cattle drives, harsh winters, and long nights under the stars, where only the sound of the wind and the creak of a saddle kept him company. Despite their different backgrounds, a bond formed. Tom admired Maya's resilience, the way she handled life with quiet courage. Maya appreciated Tom's steady presence, the way he worked hard without complaint and listened without judgment. Slowly, the boundaries between stranger and neighbor, visitor and resident, began to blur. They became companions in a world that offered little certainty, finding solace in each other's company. One evening, after a long day of tending the garden and repairing the cabin roof together, Tom and Maya sat by the fire. The sky was dark now, dotted with stars that seemed impossibly close, like a handful of diamonds scattered across black velvet. Tom stirred the flames with a stick, watching them dance. "You know," he said quietly, "I've traveled all over, seen a lot of places, but I've never met anyone like you." Maya looked at him, a soft smile on her lips. "And I've never met anyone like you either." The words hung in the air, simple yet heavy with meaning. For the first time in months, Tom felt a sense of peace he hadn't known he needed. He had always been alone, moving from town to town, keeping his heart guarded. But with Maya, there was no pretense. She didn't ask him to change who he was, and he didn't need to hide behind toughness or silence. As the fire crackled, Tom made a decision he hadn't expected to make so soon. He reached for Maya's hand, rough from work but steady, and held it gently. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," he said, "but I'd like to stay here with you, if you'll have me." Maya's eyes widened slightly, a mix of surprise and something deeper, hope perhaps, or cautious joy. She considered the words carefully, aware of the risks. Trust was not given lightly, especially in a world where danger and loss were never far away. But she saw the honesty in his eyes, the sincerity of a man who had spent his life facing hardship and who now wanted something more than the endless trail. "I would like that too," she said softly. The days that followed were filled with quiet happiness. Tom helped Maya with the farm, learning the ways of her people, understanding the land in ways he never had on his own. They worked side by side, building a life together from the ground up, their laughter and shared labor blending into the rhythm of the prairie. Yet beneath the calm and the growing affection, a secret lingered. Maya carried with her a past she had not shared, a truth that could change everything. For now, however, there was only the present, the warmth of the sun on their backs, the scent of fresh earth and smoke in the air, and the simple joy of finding a companion in a lonely world. In Red Rock, under the wide sky of the Wild West, a cowboy and an Apache widow began a new chapter of their lives. Neither knew what challenges lay ahead, but both understood that some things were worth taking a risk for: love, trust, and the hope of a future together. Tom and Maya's life together settled into a steady rhythm, but it was far from easy. Each morning, the first light of dawn found them already moving. Tom would tend to the livestock, feeding the horses, checking the cattle, and repairing any fences that had fallen to wind or storms. Maya worked the garden, planting and watering vegetables, gathering herbs, and mending clothes for the two of them. They shared tasks without complaint, understanding that survival in the harsh Wild West required teamwork, patience, and respect. Despite the hard work, they found moments of joy in the simplest things. Tom would whistle while mending fences, and Maya would hum old Apache songs as she worked the soil. Sometimes, after a long day, they would sit outside their cabin under the wide, star-filled sky, sharing stories of their pasts. Tom spoke of long cattle drives, cold nights under canvas tents, and the loneliness of the open plains. Maya spoke of her childhood near the hills, the traditions of her people, and the love she had once shared with her late husband. The differences between them were obvious, yet they made the connection stronger. Tom had been raised among cowboys and settlers, learning the ways of the trail and the land, while Maya had grown up among her Apache family, understanding the rhythms of nature and the importance of community. Still, they found common ground in hard work, honesty, and a quiet appreciation for the beauty of their surroundings. Town life was slow but not without its challenges. Red Rock was a small place, and gossip traveled faster than the wind. Some townsfolk looked at the couple with curiosity, even suspicion. It was unusual, after all, for a white cowboy and an Apache widow to marry. Some whispered behind their backs, questioning whether the marriage could last or whether the cultural differences would drive them apart. Tom and Maya, however, ignored the whispers. They had learned early in life that the opinions of strangers mattered little compared to the trust and care shared between them. One afternoon, while Tom repaired a section of the fence that had fallen in a recent windstorm, Maya came to him carrying a basket of fresh vegetables. The sun was high, making the air dry and heavy, but they didn't complain. Life had taught them to work hard and make the best of what they had. "I thought you might like some lunch," Maya said, setting the basket down on a nearby rock. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, her dark eyes reflecting both warmth and determination. Tom smiled, accepting a piece of bread from the basket. "Thank you," he said. "You're always thinking ahead." They ate together in silence for a few minutes, enjoying the quiet of the prairie. Then Tom spoke, his voice low but sincere. "I've been thinking life out here isn't easy, but I feel like I can handle it as long as I'm with you." Maya looked at him, studying his face. There was honesty there, a sense of steadiness she had come to trust. "I feel the same," she said. "It's hard, but we make it work." Their bond deepened not just through shared work, but through shared vulnerability. Maya trusted Tom with stories she had never told anyone, memories of her husband, of family, and of the hardships she had endured as a widow. Tom shared his own scars, losses from cattle drives, friends he had seen die, and nights when the loneliness had felt unbearable. In each other, they found someone who understood both strength and sorrow. Yet life on the frontier was not without danger. One morning, as Tom rode into town to buy supplies, he noticed tracks near the edge of the hills. A small group of men had passed through recently, likely looking for work or trouble. In Red Rock, outsiders could bring opportunity or danger. Tom's instincts, honed from years on the trail, made him cautious. He returned to the cabin quickly, sharing his concerns with Maya. "We have to be careful," he said. "Not everyone out there has good intentions." Maya nodded, her eyes narrowing. "I know. I've had to be careful my whole life." Despite these dangers, they continued to build their life, finding small victories in everyday moments. One day, Tom helped Maya plant a new section of the garden. He had never been skilled with plants, but under her guidance, he learned the patience required to care for growing things. They laughed when he accidentally trampled a row of young carrots, and Maya scolded him gently, showing that love could be kind even in correction. Evenings were their favorite time. After the chores were done, they would sit outside the cabin, listening to the distant howl of coyotes and the rustle of prairie grasses in the wind. Sometimes, they shared meals cooked over the fire, tasting flavors they had never known before. Maya taught Tom how to make simple dishes with fresh vegetables and herbs, and Tom shared techniques for preserving meat and making bread. These shared meals became more than sustenance. They became symbols of their partnership, a reminder that they could survive and even thrive together. As the weeks passed, Tom and Maya began to dream about the future. They spoke of expanding the farm, planting more crops, and perhaps raising a few more animals. They imagined a home filled with laughter and life, where the hardships of the West could be softened by companionship and shared effort. However, beneath the surface, there remained unspoken truths. Maya carried memories of her past that she had not yet shared, and Tom, though patient and loving, had no idea what those memories might bring. For now, the days were bright and filled with promise, but the winds of change were always present on the frontier. Life could shift in an instant, bringing challenges they could not yet foresee. Still, they cherished the present. Every sunrise, every shared task, every quiet conversation by the fire strengthened the bond between them. Tom no longer felt the emptiness that had followed him across the plains, and Maya no longer felt the isolation that had haunted her since her husband's death. Together, they were learning not just to survive, but to build something meaningful, a life shaped by trust, respect, and the courage to face each day side by side. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep reds and purples, they were sitting together on the small porch of the cabin. Tom rested his arm on the back of the wooden bench, and Maya leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his presence. I think this is where I'm meant to be," Tom said quietly, his eyes following the fading light over the hills. Maya smiled, her fingers brushing his hand. "And I'm glad you're here. Together we can face whatever comes." As night fell, the stars above Red Rock shone brightly, witness to a growing partnership built on trust and shared effort. In a world where life was often harsh and uncertain, Tom and Maya had found a place to call home and a companion to share it with. Their days were full of labor and lessons, but also of laughter, understanding, and the simple joy of being together. In the heart of the Wild West, a cowboy and an Apache widow had begun to carve out a life that promised hope, stability, and perhaps, in time, love that could endure anything the frontier threw at them. And though neither knew what the future held, for now they were content in the quiet strength of their partnership, ready to face each day as it came, side by side. Life at the cabin had grown comfortable for Tom and Maya. Days passed with routine work, shared meals, and quiet evenings under the stars. Tom had come to admire Maya's resilience, her knowledge of the land, and the quiet strength with which she faced life. He thought he knew her completely, or at least as completely as anyone could know another person in the wide, unpredictable West. But life often held secrets that waited for the right moment to reveal themselves. One afternoon, as Tom worked on repairing the fence along the edge of the property, he noticed movement near the hills. At first, he thought it was a deer or one of the wild animals that roamed the area. But as he squinted against the sunlight, he saw the figure of a boy, small and thin, with dark hair and wary eyes. The boy moved cautiously, stopping occasionally to glance around, as if he feared someone might be watching. Tom frowned. He did not recognize the child, and his presence so close to the cabin made Tom uneasy. He dismounted from his horse and walked slowly toward the boy, keeping his voice calm. "Hey there," Tom called gently. "What's your name?" The boy flinched at the sound of his voice but did not run. Instead, he held his ground, eyes flicking toward the cabin where Maya had just come outside to see who Tom was talking to. "This is Little Hawk," Maya said softly, stepping closer. Her tone was quiet, almost hesitant, but firm. She looked at Tom with a mixture of anxiety and resignation. "He is my son." Tom froze, the hammer he had been holding dropping to the ground with a soft clang. He stared at Maya, then at the boy, unable to speak for a few moments. His mind raced. All this time he had believed he knew everything about her life. He had trusted her completely. And now, without warning, a part of her past appeared at their doorstep, a part he had never been told about. Maya's eyes filled with a quiet sadness. "I didn't mean to hide him," she said. "I was only trying to protect him. The world, it isn't kind. I feared what might happen if people knew about him. He's lived with relatives in the hills to stay safe." Tom ran a hand over his face, struggling to understand. Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was calm, but there was a tension in it that even he could feel. "I didn't know how," Maya admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "I was afraid you might not accept him. I was afraid it would change everything between us." Little Hawk stood silently, his dark eyes wide. He looked from Maya to Tom, sensing the tension but unsure of what to do. He was used to hiding, used to keeping his distance from anyone who might hurt his mother or himself. Tom took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside him. He had always known that life on the frontier was unpredictable, that danger and surprise were constant companions. But this was different. This was personal. This was a challenge he had never faced before. I need to understand," Tom said finally. He knelt down to Little Hawk's level, trying to meet the boy's eyes. "I'm Tom. I'm your mother's husband. I didn't know about you before, but I want to be someone you can trust." Little Hawk hesitated, uncertainty written across his face. He had lived with fear and caution for years, learning not to trust easily. But there was something in Tom's voice, steady and honest, that made him pause. Slowly he nodded, a small gesture of tentative acceptance. Maya stepped closer, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. "He means no harm, Little Hawk. He wants to be part of our life. You don't have to decide anything right away." The days that followed were awkward at first. Tom tried to include Little Hawk in daily chores, showing him how to feed the horses, mend fences, and help with the garden. The boy was cautious, keeping his distance, and often retreating to the hills when he felt overwhelmed. Maya tried to mediate, reminding them both that trust and patience were necessary. Tom felt a mixture of emotions. He loved Maya, but suddenly he had a new responsibility he hadn't anticipated. He worried that he would fail, that he wouldn't know how to be the kind of father figure Little Hawk needed. And yet, he felt a determination rising within him. Life had taught him to face challenges, and he was not about to give up on this one. Little Hawk watched Tom from a distance, curious but wary. He had never met anyone who cared for his mother the way Tom seemed to. He had grown used to people leaving, to promises broken or unfulfilled. But Tom was different. He worked hard, he spoke kindly, and he didn't try to take control of the household or his mother's life. Slowly, Little Hawk began to observe him, learning who he was. One morning, Tom found Little Hawk sitting by the river that ran near the cabin, skipping stones across the water. The boy's face was thoughtful, his hands small and nimble as he tossed the stones. Tom approached slowly, careful not to startle him. "Mind if I join you?" Tom asked. Little Hawk looked up, hesitated, then nodded. Tom sat beside him, picking up a flat stone and tossing it carefully across the water. They didn't speak at first, only watched the ripples spread across the river's surface. "You're good at that," Little Hawk said finally, a small smile forming. Tom smiled back. "Takes practice. You want me to show you a trick?" For the first time, Little Hawk relaxed slightly. He allowed Tom to show him how to skip a stone more than once. The boy laughed when he missed, and Tom laughed too. It was a small moment, but it was a start. A bridge had begun to form between them. Over the next weeks, their bond grew slowly. Tom continued to help with chores, and Little Hawk started to follow him around the property, learning skills that were both practical and fun. They rode horses together, tended the garden, and sometimes just sat by the fire, talking about small things, what the wind smelled like, the color of the sunset, the animals they saw on the prairie. Maya watched them with quiet relief. Her son had begun to open up, and Tom had shown patience and care she had feared he might not have. She realized that the family she had hidden for safety was slowly coming together, piece by piece. Still, the secret of little Hawk's presence was a delicate matter. Tom had to adjust his understanding of Maya's past, and little Hawk had to adjust to the idea of a new adult in his life. It was not easy, but with each passing day, trust grew. The boy began to see Tom as someone dependable, someone who would not leave or betray him. Tom began to see the joy and resilience in little Hawk, a child shaped by loss but not defeated by it. By the time the first frost of the season appeared, covering the hills and cabin in a soft white dusting, a quiet harmony had settled over the household. Tom, Maya, and little Hawk were no longer three individuals coexisting. They were beginning to feel like a family. The days were filled with work, the nights with shared warmth by the fire, and the challenges of the West no longer seemed as daunting when faced together. Yet, as always in the Wild West, life remained unpredictable. There were still dangers outside the cabin, storms, bandits, and the harshness of the land itself. But inside, the family had discovered something stronger than fear: trust, patience, and the slow, steady growth of love. And for the first time, Tom understood that the life he had been searching for on the endless trail was not just a cabin or a patch of land. It was this. It was Maya's presence, little Hawk's cautious trust, and the shared work and care that bound them together. In the vast, unforgiving world of the Wild West, he had found a reason to stay, a reason to fight for tomorrow, and a reason to believe in the strength of family. Life at the cabin had begun to settle into a new rhythm, but it was far from easy. Tom, Maya, and little Hawk were learning to live together as a family, but the process was not without its challenges. Tom loved Maya deeply, but the sudden responsibility of caring for her son was something he had never anticipated. He had been a cowboy all his life, accustomed to independence and solitude. Now he was being asked to step into a role that required patience, understanding, and a kind of love that went beyond the familiar ways of the trail. Little Hawk was equally cautious. He had grown up learning to protect himself and his mother, wary of strangers and new situations. He respected Tom for his strength and quiet determination, but he was not ready to trust him fully. Many nights the boy would retreat to the hills behind the cabin, sitting alone and watching the firelight from a distance. Maya would worry, silently praying that her son would come to see that Tom meant no harm. Tom noticed the distance at first and felt a pang of frustration mixed with concern. He had never wanted a child before, never considered himself a father, and now he had to earn the trust of someone who had every reason to doubt him. One morning, after little Hawk refused to help with the morning chores and disappeared into the hills, Tom walked after him. "Little Hawk," Tom called gently, keeping his voice calm. "I'm not going to hurt you, I just want to help." The boy froze but didn't run. He had learned over time that some threats were real, but others were just words. He turned slightly, glancing at Tom with suspicion. "Why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. Tom sighed and sat down on a large rock nearby. He gestured for the boy to come closer. "Because I care about your mother, and if she is happy, then I want to be someone who can protect both of you. I don't expect you to trust me immediately, but I hope you'll let me try." Little Hawk looked at Tom for a long moment. There was honesty in his eyes, a kind of steadiness that matched the man before him. Slowly, he walked closer, though he kept a safe distance. Over the next several days, Tom made small efforts to connect with the boy. He taught him how to ride a horse properly, how to lasso cattle, and even shared simple games that required patience and skill. At first, little Hawk participated reluctantly, often stopping mid-task or walking away when things became too difficult. But Tom never forced him, never showed anger or disappointment. He knew that trust could not be demanded, it had to be earned. Maya watched these moments with quiet relief. She had feared that the presence of her son might drive a wedge between herself and Tom. But now she saw him making an effort, showing kindness and consistency in ways that words alone could not convey. She encouraged little Hawk, reminding him that people could surprise you if you gave them a chance. One afternoon, a storm swept across the prairie. Thunder rolled in the distance and the wind picked up, sending dust and debris across the land. Little Hawk panicked, running toward the cabin with fear in his eyes. Tom caught him mid-run and held him firmly but gently. "It's okay," Tom said, his voice calm and steady. "Storms come, but we can handle them. You're safe here." Little Hawk clung to Tom for a moment, then slowly relaxed. The storm raged around them, but inside the cabin they were protected. Maya smiled from the doorway, seeing the bond forming between her husband and her son. She realized that this moment, small as it was, marked a turning point. Days turned into weeks and the household began to find balance. Tom and Little Hawk started to work together naturally, whether it was repairing fences, tending to the garden, or caring for the animals. The boy began to see that Tom's intentions were genuine and that he could rely on him for guidance, protection, and even companionship. Maya also found herself feeling more at ease. She no longer had to carry the weight of her past alone. Tom's presence allowed her to share both the joys and the burdens of daily life. Together, they created a home where trust and love were growing, even amidst the hardships of the Wild West. However, challenges were never far away. One evening, while Tom and Little Hawk were returning from the river with fresh water, they noticed tracks in the dirt, large boots not far from the cabin. Bandits or other strangers were always a possibility in these parts, and Tom's instincts told him to be alert. He led Little Hawk quietly back to the cabin and closed the door, securing the windows. Maya sensed the tension immediately. "What is it?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. "Tracks," Tom replied. "Someone has been near the cabin. Could be harmless, but we need to stay cautious." That night they sat together in the cabin, listening to the wind and the sounds outside. Tom kept a watchful eye on Little Hawk, ensuring that the boy felt safe despite the threat. They spoke quietly, sharing stories of past dangers they had faced. Little Hawk began to see that Tom was not just strong, but wise, someone who could face the harshness of the world without fear and someone who could keep them safe. The storm and the potential threat from outsiders strengthened the bond between them. Little Hawk learned to trust that Tom would protect him, while Tom learned to be patient with the boy's fears and cautious nature. Maya felt a deep sense of relief, knowing that her son was slowly accepting the man she loved, and that Tom was learning to love the boy as part of their growing family. One day, after weeks of careful effort, Little Hawk followed Tom into the hills to check on the animals grazing there. The boy walked confidently beside Tom, asking questions, laughing at small mistakes, and even teasing him playfully. It was a simple moment, but it meant more than any words could express. Tom realized that trust had been earned, not given, and that the family they were building was stronger because of it. Even the townspeople began to notice the change. Rumors and whispers about the unusual couple gradually turned to admiration. People saw a family working together, supporting one another despite differences in culture, age, and experience. Tom, Maya, and Little Hawk became examples of resilience, patience, and the power of trust in a harsh world. As the season shifted toward winter, the family continued to face challenges: cold nights, heavy snow, and occasional shortages of supplies, but they faced them together. Each difficulty was met with teamwork and mutual care. Tom taught Little Hawk how to chop firewood, repair shelters, and even cook simple meals. Maya guided them both, ensuring that the household ran smoothly while also nurturing their growing relationships. By the time the first deep snow fell, the cabin was warm, stocked with food and firewood, and filled with the quiet strength of a family learning to thrive together. Tom, Maya, and Little Hawk had endured weeks of uncertainty, frustration, and learning, but they had come out stronger. Trust had been built, bonds had been formed, and the beginnings of true love and family connection were finally taking root. The Wild West remained dangerous and unpredictable, but within the small cabin, there was a sense of stability and hope. Tom had discovered that love and family required patience, understanding, and courage beyond what he had known as a cowboy. Little Hawk had learned that not all adults brought danger. Some could bring safety, guidance, and care. And Maya had found that her past, once hidden in fear, could now be shared without losing the love she had found. Together, they faced the challenges of the frontier, building a life that was stronger than fear, isolation, or loss. And though the future remained uncertain, they had discovered that the bonds of family could endure even in the harshest of worlds. Winter had settled over the prairie, covering the hills and fields with a soft blanket of snow. The cabin, small but sturdy, stood against the cold, its chimney sending a thin line of smoke into the gray sky. Inside, the warmth of the fire filled the rooms, and the scent of herbs and baked bread lingered in the air. Life was not easy in the Wild West, but Tom, Maya, and Little Hawk had learned to face hardship together. Each challenge they overcame had strengthened their bond, and now, after months of patience, struggle, and understanding, they were becoming a true family. The morning began like any other. Tom rose early, as he always did, and fed the horses, checking them for injuries or illness. Little Hawk followed him, carrying buckets of water and helping as best he could. His movements were confident now, his fear replaced by a growing sense of belonging. Maya watched from the doorway, a proud smile on her face. She had seen her son learn to trust, to laugh, and to work alongside the man she loved, and her heart felt lighter than it had in years. After breakfast, the trio set out to inspect the perimeter of the farm. Winter could bring trouble: frozen water troughs, snowdrifts blocking paths, or predators drawn to the livestock. Tom led the way, showing Little Hawk how to look for tracks in the snow, how to keep animals calm during storms, and how to respond quickly if danger approached. The boy listened carefully, asking questions and following instructions, but he also began to offer his own ideas, surprising Tom with his quick thinking and sharp observation. By mid-afternoon, they returned to the cabin, tired but satisfied with their work. They huddled around the fire to warm themselves, sharing stories from their pasts. Little Hawk spoke of the hills he had hidden in as a younger child, of times when he had feared being alone. Tom shared tales of cattle drives through blizzards, nights when he had slept under the stars with only his horse for company. Maya told stories of her family, her childhood, and her late husband, speaking of love, loss, and the lessons she had learned from both. For the first time, the three of them felt truly connected. The awkwardness and uncertainty that had marked the early days were gone. Trust had been built, not forced, and love had grown slowly but steadily. The cabin no longer felt like just a house. It felt like a home, filled with warmth, laughter, and the quiet certainty of companionship. One evening, a knock came at the door. Tom opened it cautiously to find an older man from the town standing there, holding a letter. "Evening, Tom," the man said. "This arrived for you. Thought you might want to see it inside." Tom took the letter and glanced at it. It was from a distant relative who owned a small ranch a few days' ride away. They had heard of his skills with horses and cattle and offered him a partnership if he was willing to leave Red Rock. Tom read the letter slowly, considering the possibilities. It was an opportunity for growth and security, but it also meant leaving the life he had begun to build with Maya and Little Hawk. Maya watched him carefully. She understood the temptation. The offer promised stability and resources, but she also knew that Tom's heart was with them now, with the family they had formed. "What will you do?" she asked softly, sensing his inner conflict. Tom looked at her and Little Hawk, seeing the faces of the family he had chosen. "I've thought a lot about this," he said finally, "but my place is here with you and Little Hawk. This," he gestured to the cabin and the small farm, "is more important than anything else." Little Hawk's eyes lit up, a shy smile spreading across his face. "You're staying?" he asked. "Yes," Tom said firmly, "we're staying together." That night they sat by the fire, sharing a simple meal and talking about plans for the next season. They discussed planting new crops, reinforcing the fences, and preparing for the next harsh winter. But beyond the work, there was a sense of peace and joy that came from knowing they had chosen each other, that they had faced challenges and come through stronger. The following weeks were filled with routine and hard work, but also with moments of celebration. Tom and Little Hawk rode together to check the distant fences, laughing and joking along the way. Maya joined them in tending the garden, showing them how to preserve vegetables for the long winter months. They sang together while chopping firewood, sharing meals over the fire, and sometimes simply sitting outside, watching the sun set behind the snowy hills. One day, as they were clearing snow from the stable, Tom noticed Little Hawk struggling with a heavy bale of hay. He stepped forward to help, but the boy insisted on doing it himself. Tom watched quietly, letting him learn the strength of persistence. Little Hawk grinned as he succeeded, proud of his accomplishment, and Tom felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what family meant: helping, guiding, and celebrating each other's successes. Maya joined them, brushing snow off her shoulders. She had never felt more content. The past, with its loss and pain, was still a part of her, but it no longer defined her present. She had found love, trust, and stability in the most unlikely place, with the man she loved and the son she had feared sharing. Together, they had created a life that was strong, warm, and full of hope. As winter gave way to spring, the land began to awaken. Snow melted into streams and green shoots appeared in the garden. The family worked together to prepare for planting, their laughter and voices filling the air. Little Hawk ran freely across the fields, no longer cautious or fearful, but confident and happy. Tom taught him new skills, and Maya guided them both with patience and wisdom. The people of Red Rock took notice of the change. The whispers and rumors had faded, replaced by admiration and respect. They saw a family that had faced challenges, secrets, and uncertainty, and had emerged stronger. Tom, Maya, and Little Hawk had built a life based on trust, love, and the quiet strength of commitment. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, casting a golden light across the prairie, the three of them sat together on the cabin porch. Tom put his arm around Maya and Little Hawk leaned against her other side. The wind carried the faint scent of flowers and fresh soil, and the sky was painted in brilliant shades of pink and purple. "I never thought life could be like this," Tom said quietly. "I used to ride alone, facing the world without anyone to care for or protect me, but now I have both of you, and I wouldn't trade this for anything." Maya smiled, her eyes shining. "We've found each other," she said. "Even with all the hardships, we've built something real. Something lasting." Little Hawk looked up at Tom and Maya, a small but confident smile on his face. "I'm glad we're together," he said simply. In that moment, the Wild West seemed less harsh, less unforgiving. The challenges of life, the storms, the loneliness, the dangers were still there, waiting beyond the hills. But inside the cabin, in the warmth of firelight and family, there was safety, love, and hope. They had faced hardships, secrets, and fears, and emerged stronger together. Tom, Maya, and Little Hawk had become a true family, bound not just by circumstance, but by choice, trust, and love. And as the stars appeared in the night sky, shining bright above Red Rock, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it side by side. In the heart of the Wild West, where life was unpredictable and often cruel, a cowboy and Apache widow and her son had found a rare and precious thing, a family that could endure anything. And for the first time in his life, Tom felt that he had finally come home.